I'm Shruti Mukund. I've met some of you last week, and for the rest of you, I'm the new Director of Community Engagement here at Olney. Community engagement at Olney Theatre engages communities that surrounds us, specifically those that haven't historically felt represented or welcome at Olney Theatre. So I've spent my time here since June in understanding who the community really is that come to Olney already, what they love about our theatre, and how we can extend that same welcome and service to others who haven't been here before. And it came out of the whole, Olney's been working towards the anti-racist mission, so this is a part of that where we want to make it welcome and do community-led programming, community-inspired programming, and make it equitably rather than saying this is what we think you should watch and you should come here. The tradition behind this event, the behind the scenes, began to give our patrons and those in the community an opportunity to contextualize the shows we produce. We wanted to understand why we picked the play over and beyond the brilliant artistry while highlighting themes that resonate with us and the surrounding communities. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have already watched the play? Okay, great. So the rest of you are here to watch it today or on another day? Okay. So I promise I won't give you this plot line. But actually not. You will get a lot of it. Larissa FastHorse from the Lakota Nation is a 2020 MacArthur Fellow, award-winning writer, choreographer, and a co-founder of the Indigenous Direction, the nation's leading consulting company for Indigenous arts and audiences. Her satirical comedy, The Thanksgiving Play, which you either watched or you'll be watching, by the Playwrights Horizons Geffen Playhouse, they commissioned it first, is one of the top 10 most produced plays in America as of 2019, in the 2019 season, and you'll see why. Larissa's FastHorse's work, The Thanksgiving Play, reminds us that celebrating Thanksgiving without understanding the violent history beneath it amounts to a second erasure of this country's indigenous peoples. We are having these conversations around the play to illustrate that not just at Thanksgiving or at this play or at this time, that we should be thinking about the history of the land we call home. I moved to the US 21 years ago and call Maryland my home now. But over the years, I've spent time researching and learning the local history, and I always uncover something new. Sharing an excerpt of the Olney Theatre's land acknowledgement statement, Olney Theatre is situated on unceded land that is ancestral of the home of the Piscataway Conoy tribe. We are grateful for the territory upon which we gather today, and we respect Maryland's indigenous peoples, the original stewards of the land. To begin to understand and explore that sentiment, last week we had a conversation with Piscataway elder Rico Newman and Quaker historian Tom Farquhar and Natalie Thomas from the Sandy Springs Slave Museum, who shared intimate stories about their connection and history of Olney and the immediate surrounding areas. So today, we hope to learn more about the other tribes that were the original stewards of the land that became Maryland on July 4th, 1776. The Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs recognizes and serves 8 distinct native groups: the Accohannock Indian tribe, the Assateague Peoples tribe, the Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, it's a subgroup of the Piscataway Conoy tribe, the Nosay by Wash Band of Indians, the Piscataway Conoy Confederacy, and subtribes, subgroup of the Piscataway Conoy tribe, the Piscataway Indian Nation, and the Pocomoke Indian Nation, and the Yogiogeni River Bend of Shawnee Indians. So we have reminders of Maryland's rich and complex indigenous history in our daily lives in the form of the remnant street names, school names, and most importantly, the Potomac and the Patuxent River. In fact, I live in Bethesda, and the first time I saw the Burning Tree Elementary School, I was like, why would somebody name a school for education, because in India growing up, like names always have meaning, so it's connected to something or some quality somebody has. So I was like, why are they relating education to a burning tree? And then I discovered that it was a remnant of the native name, and there was so much more I learned because of that. But I don't even know if the kids who go to Burning Tree even have had that moment to consider that. So that's what we hope to kind of get everybody's wheels going. We begin today's event with the Native American activist Peter Brooks, who already shared some of his thing with you. We'll be doing the Gyun Yuk, which is the oldest known public address or prayer available today. These are words before all else, which means for thousands of years, this ceremony would begin any meeting, negotiation, event, sport, or gathering. This everyday greeting is prehistoric and unpretentious, but still holds enormous power and unfortunately rarely done in modern times. But I'd like to now welcome Peter Brooks to do the Gyun Yuk for us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So, a couple of things about the Thanksgiving address. And first, before I begin, I just can't tell you all what an honor it is for me to share the stage with Keith Colston. I've known Keith for a number of years, and he's always been a very honest, sincere, and truthful person. Very intelligent too. And I just really look up to him as the governor's appointee to lead the Maryland Commission. And it's just an honor, I think, for all of us to be in his presence, honestly. Thank you. My family history, my family is so far removed, even if my oldest known grandfather, Sam Proctor, was a full-blood, I'm probably so many generations removed. But Keith really has his history. I've had to learn all this stuff. Keith grew up in it. But no matter what, he had the decision to make whether he was going to honor his tradition or assimilate. And he chose to honor his tradition. And he conducts himself in a very high office in a traditional way. And that is absolutely outstanding. So, having said that, this address is from the Seneca tribe. The Seneca are part of the Iroquois nation. My tribe, the Piscataway Conoy tribe, would have been more of an Algonquin. We would not have said this exact address, but it's safe to say something like this would have preceded all events. So before a play could begin, or a negotiation, or breakfast, or something like that, this is how people would greet each other. So if you can imagine, this is happening as you hear it, several places all at once, this greetings to the natural world. The second thing I have to tell you is I am like pre-kindergarten on this thing, right? I mean, there are people who can really do this, and if you want access to them, again, it would probably be through Keith. But they can do this in the traditional language and all that. I am just really inspired by doing as much as I can. I don't have it memorized because I'm always feeling it so much when I do it. So it's quite an experience. Another thing I'll tell you, which is a fact among the tribes in this area, in this region, we would never begin anything until the oldest woman in the room that said it was okay. So, is that all right? So that tells you something about the mentality, that we are going to take care of our elders first, and we being a matriarchal tribe, the women would come before the men. I again am adapting this. I'm a hybridization type of person. This address is available on the website of the Smithsonian Institution, therefore it's public. A lot of these ceremonies and songs and stuff, I do not have the authority to sing, and therefore I don't sing them in public, until someone says to me, an elder says, you can sing this, I'm going to give you this song, you should give this address, at which point I would have the authority. But because this is available publicly, it is, therefore, it's okay for me to say it. It is a public address. So it's not a prayer, but it kind of is. And it's not just an address, and you'll see as it goes along. I could imagine this would be something like a pep rally. We would be in a longhouse, not a round one, but a longer one. And as this is being recited, you are to respond to me, okay? I am going to say this phrase, now our minds are one. And your traditional response is to say, yo. Yo, can I hear you? Yo. 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 So you can say that with all the feeling that you want. And you don't have to wait for the moment to say it too. If I say something that strikes you, you can holler out, yeah, because you'll see why. This is a real Thanksgiving, all right, address. So, I feel like I want to stand to do this, but the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving Address. Greetings to the natural world. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in peace and harmony with each other and all living things. So now, we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now, our minds are one. Yo! The Earth Mother. We are all thankful to our mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need to live. She supports our feet as we walk upon her. It gives us great joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now, our minds are one. Yo! We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms. Waterfalls and rain, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the spirit of water. Now, our minds are one. Yo! We turn our minds to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves to us as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water. So we turn now to the fish and send our greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. No. Now we turn to the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now, our minds are one. Yo! With one mind, we turn and honor and thank all the food plants we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped the people survive. Many other things draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one, and we send them a greeting of thanks. Now our minds are one.
Yo!
Now we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness, and they have always been waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy that there are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to all the medicine herbs and to the keepers of the medicines. We send thanks. Now our minds are one.
Yo!
We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as humans. We are honored by them when they give their lives so that we may use their bodies as food for our people. We see them near our homes and deep in the forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope it will always be so. Now our minds are one.
Yo!
The trees. We now turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many people of the world use a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now our minds are one.
Yo!
The birds. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds that move and fly over our heads. The Creator gave them such beautiful songs. Every day, they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one.
Yo!
The four winds. We are thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air that we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons from the four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. Now, our minds are one.
Yo!
The thunderers. Now we turn to the west, where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them the water that renews life. We are thankful that they keep those evil things made by equisseries underground. We bring our minds together as one and send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the Thunderers. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
The sun. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day, without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing forth the light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
Grandmother Moon. We put our minds together to give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of all the women of the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time, and it is the moon that watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
The stars. We give thanks to the stars who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bring dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds together as one, we send greetings and thanks to the stars. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
The enlightened teachers. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout all the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to all these caring teachers. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
The Creator. We turn our thoughts to the Creator, or Great Spirit. And we send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greetings and thanks to the Creator. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. Now, our minds are one.
Yo.
You may proceed. Wanted to say the speech is really a codification of the great law of peace, which was the governing law of the land prior to colonialism. So the speech is really a reflection of the Great Law of Peace and its jurisprudence.
Thank you, Peter. That was a very lovely offering. I'd like to invite Keith Colston, who serves on the Maryland Governor's Commission on Indian Affairs.
First of all, let me stand and introduce myself. My name is Keith Colston. I am the Administrative Director for the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. I also serve a dual role as the Director for the Ethnic Commissions under the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. Juana Skinehe, I welcome you in my tribal language, which is Skarure of the Tuscarora people. I am not indigenous to the state of Maryland, yet I've always had a close tie to this particular state, to the particular area of Baltimore. And because of my prior engagements, before coming to this great state, it led me really to the position that I'm in now. To be the director of an Indian Affairs or of an Indian Commission has always been a lifelong goal. My mentor, who is Greg Richardson, who serves still as the director for the North Carolina Commission on Indian Affairs, gave me the will and the desire to serve my people in the most or in the best capacity that I felt that was to be, and of course that would be to lead a commission on Indian Affairs. Not every state has a commission on Indian Affairs, so we're very fortunate that Maryland does. And that was established in 1974 as we were a part of the African American History and Culture Commission. We were a dual commission. And in 1976, we were a standalone commission. So a lot of times when people are talking about, well, when did the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs come about? And I like to be somewhat specific in certain situations or for certain situations or things. And so it's important to share that because, again, by two groups of individuals working together, those who were behind the scenes in doing so and putting forth what needed to be for this legislation to come about, it's about respect, it's about honor and courtesy. And so, again, in 1974, sharing that particular situation with another commission and then coming to ourselves in 76. So when we celebrated our 45th anniversary, some people were saying, well, Keith, you're giving the wrong date. And it's really important that we're very mindful of why we say what we say, why we do what we do, and to be as specific as possible when it relates to a lot of things that determine how we see ourselves and how other people will look upon us, especially when it comes to our tribal people. From a historical standpoint, from a contemporary standpoint, and that's what the commission is all about, is to make sure that we bring about that awareness to individuals who are unknowing or have a certain perception, who may not have the facts. And that's really what I'm here to do here today, ladies and gentlemen, is to provide you the facts in reference to the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. I take great pride in that, great joy. Even if I wasn't in this position, that the idea of Indian Affairs remains with me. So I've been very fortunate to serve in a variety of positions throughout my time and then leading me here to this tenure. Now, was my tenure began with as being the administrative director? No, I actually served as a commissioner in 1995. And what I found is that I was not being as instrumental as I thought I could be. And so therefore, I removed myself from that position. And fortunately enough, I was asked to come back. And then, of course, leading me to where I'm at now. So sort of a synopsis of why I'm where I'm at and what has led me here today as well. My goal here also is to not only talk about what you can read on the internet, what you can read on our website, which is under the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives, but give you a bit more insight and to have that fluid conversation or back and forth conversation about questions you may have and thoughts and concerns. You might find that I might sit down, I might stand up, and that's for a variety of reasons. But I believe that definitely the respect that you deserve as a visiting crowd coming here, listening to what we have to say and what we have to share, does bring about me standing and giving you that. So no disrespect to anyone else who may sit down, but again, that's pretty much my motion in the way that I do things. I don't like to be confined either, and I'll tell you why. Because with tribal people, we're sort of been used to being confined, if you know what I mean, historically. And so I like to do a bit of moving around. I'm also use a lot of hand gestures when I speak because not only do I speak from a factual point of view, but it's also the desire and the hope that not only do you hear what I'm saying, not only that you will comprehend what I'm saying, but hopefully it will enter this area and that you'll be willing to share it with other people, just not taking it here for today. When we think about the population of tribal people, one of the goals of the commission is to make sure that proper data collection is done. And without proper data, factual data collection, know that the real picture, the real story, the facts cannot be there. And so therefore, one of the goals of our organization, one of our goals of our commission, which is to represent all tribal people to the best of our abilities. And this is why when she was mentioning the different communities that are there, write this down, the different communities that exist in Maryland, it is to truly represent them as the indigenous people. And that's such a strong statement. We think about the word indigenous. That's a word and term that's being used a lot. And I apologize if I jump around a little bit, but if you do have a question or whatever I might say, please let me know. But when we think about the word indigenous, the people, the first peoples of the land, so important. Because when we think about the indigenous people of Maryland and the changes that they've gone through ever since John Smith came up to Chesapeake and started documenting who was who and where they were at, and the many changes that have transpired since then, whether it was because of the way people could or could not pronounce something or pronounce a person's name or tribe or area, the community, the village. If it was in reference to the type of way that people would write things down, forget, or be a little bit nonchalant, and then how those changes came about into where those things are at today. And whereas we do our best to make sure, yes, it's to represent the contemporary side, but also to take a look back at the historical situations, not just from one part of society, which is mainstream society, but also that cultural aspect, that indigenous aspect. And so when I take a step, I always like to be a bit visual here. So when I take a step here and I take a step here, I like for those steps to be balanced. So for instance, it's not about me knowing everything there is about my cultural side or everything there is about the indigenous side of Maryland, but also how it has interacted with, as we like to say, mainstream society. And so with that, to point out not just the indigenous tribes, but also to point out those tribes who have come into the area as well, like the Lumbee. I happen to be Tuscarora and Lumbee. I am Turtle Clan. And all that has to deal not only with my particular tribe from North Carolina, but of course with the tribes here in Maryland, because this is a regional situation. And so I'm able to share that information here because it helps that we learn from each other, that we're able to encourage each other, learn from each other. We talked about the Haudenosaunee people. We talked about their governance and how that existed prior, and how that same type of structure with the making sure that the oldest woman in the crowd or amongst the people was satisfied that we could begin. A lot of times those were our clan mothers, and those clan mothers exist here today amongst the tribes of Maryland. And how we as an administration, how we as a commission, that we respect that type of governance and situation. So this leads me to my next point, is that we never involve ourselves in the internal conflicts of a community or of a tribe. It's very important that we keep that very visible. There are some individuals who would love for us to involve ourselves beyond those limitations, but of course we know that would create a precedent that would not serve the right purpose or the correct purpose. I don't like to use the words right and wrong. I think we all have an idea or opinion what that is, but the correct way of doing things. Of course, we as a state commission, we work from a procedural manner. So we always try to let people know we do not interfere. What we do is we act as a resource to Indian people, to our tribal communities, those who make themselves present to us, and also those who are seated on the commission. So let me go back or digress a little bit back to how the commission is structured. We are, again, created by legislation. We have 9 seats that are individuals who are nominated by the tribal leaders, the tribal councils, or by the community. And then those individuals are sent to the appointments office, and then they are, of course, appointed by the governor or by the governor's appointee. And so when we think about that, that's a beautiful structure. Prior to 2005, that was not the case. Prior to 2005, pretty much any native person could serve. But think about this, folks. How well can the tribal people of Maryland be served if it doesn't have its own people there at the table helping to make those major decisions? So it's sort of like the situation that all of the United States and all of tribal communities throughout Turtle Island, or what we now call North America, or more centralized the United States, is that it was always someone else speaking on our behalf. And what we realized in 2005, as far as the state was concerned, is that we've got to have the people speaking for themselves. Imagine someone speaking for you all the time. Imagine how much of a lesser freedom that you really would have having someone speak for you continuously. And that's really what was taking place, throughout Indian country, throughout North America, and truly what was going on here in the state of Maryland. So once again, 2005, the decision was made, let's make sure that we have as many of the tribal people as possible sitting or being appointed to this particular commission. And that's exactly what took place. And so I've had the great fortune that in 2007, January of 2007, I was given the opportunity to serve in this capacity. And the word serve is a great word to me. One of the greatest things we can do is to serve. And that's truly the case amongst Indian people. We think about not only the tribal leaders here in Maryland, but the tribal leaders all across the country, is that they were many times historically, as we like to always point out historically to the contemporary, the poorest of the people, because they were always giving to everyone else. So it was really different. Now, and I'm very cautious in my words. When I say the word different, it usually has a negative connotation. So many times when people were being treated or were kings and queens, it was the people giving to them. Whereas a chief or tribal leader, a powwow, an important person who was speaking, or that person who was amongst the people who held that position, it was about them giving to everyone else. And so the poorest of the people. And today I still, in a very respectful manner, remind, any tribal leader, in a very respectful manner, that it's that they answer to the people. So when I say I serve, I love saying that. I serve more than 100,000 tribal people who may live in the state of Maryland by the 2020 census, which has grown, which is a great thing. And then the 31,000 that identify as Native only. So we represent those who are not only Native, but are Native and representing, of course, another ethnicity. So that's the beauty of the census. Now, why do I bring up the census at this point in time? Because the census is a part of the Maryland Indian Status Process. You're saying, okay, Maryland Indian Status Process, what's so big about that? It utilizes the year 1790. Why does it utilize 1790? Because 1790 was the first census that was done in this country. It was a good start. Was it really done the way it should have been? No. Let me give you a good reason why, ladies and gentlemen. Because, and I apologize, it seems more like a history lesson, but it's really important that we understand, when we think about the census and how it was done, then how it was done up until probably about 1980, is that we have this gentleman here who is Native. And then, of course, everyone in his family maybe has 3 children, a wife. And during the time, everyone may be considered Native in the household, even though that the wife may not be Native. Now here's the flip side, here's more the reality, that this individual was non-Native, and he married a Native woman, and everyone in the household was not considered Native, but whatever that individual was, whether it be Caucasian, African American, whatever the case may be. So we see how proper data collection is so important to represent truly who the people are, because we need to know, again, those numbers and how they're reflected, and how that may, again, progress to other situations that we're familiar with or unfamiliar with. Funding, education, economic opportunity, faith-based organizations and situations that come about. And all of these things are, again, what the commission works towards. Economic development, education. Education not only for our own people, but also for mainstream society. Economic opportunity. And that economic opportunity comes not only through small businesses, but also those who are consultants, those who are artists, those who are, again, creating a livelihood that benefits not only their family, but once again, comes back to the people in the community themselves. As we know that many of the people who may leave their community, they come back, bringing about those skills and skill sets that will create better opportunities in the future of the people in that particular community. We think about 7 generations. You may have heard that term before, maybe you have not. 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. That first concept was shared, and more so in a broad manner, by the Haudenosaunee people, but truly that of those tribes here in Maryland and up and down the eastern seaboard. 7 generations back, 7 generations forward. So it's not about what Peter does. It's not about what I do. It's about, again, what is going to take place that has occurred before me, that I'm going to carry and push on for the generations that are in front of me. 7. 7 a very significant number. My people, we sometimes use the number 4 as well. And if you notice, again, that again, not about the individual, but about the people. And so we think about the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs and its goals, its contributions, it's some of its situations that have occurred. It's about bringing people together with a common voice, with a unified voice, that will, again, promote the well-being of tribal people here in this great state. It's done through a variety of situations, partnerships, working in tandem with other state agencies, working in the private sector. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that, and not speaking from a historical account, but speaking from a contemporary situation. Working with private entities like a business that would allow us to store items that would be donated from one entity, holding it where tribal people can utilize these things. And these are the initiatives that we create on an ongoing basis. So you say, well, so you create an initiative. What's our goal? Not just to have one initiative, but if we do one initiative one year, we do 2 initiatives next year. If we do 3 initiatives next year, we do 3 or 4 initiatives the year after that. So it's an ongoing thing. So we keep these initiatives going, but we also are creating new initiatives. That's not only our goal, but it's part of our policy and procedures of the commission itself. We think about also how is it that we do this, not just from a procedural manner, but how we work with tribal leadership, tribal council, respecting who they are, their boundaries in a variety of ways, and making sure that we're doing what we need to do for them. And one of the biggest things that we do, ladies and gentlemen, is in reference to Maryland Indian status, state recognition. Some of you have heard of federally recognized tribes, state recognized tribes, and self-identifying tribes. There's 2 sides of the coin in everything in my life. There's 2 sides of the coin. There's the balance that I keep in my life from a cultural and spiritual standpoint. Even, when we think about the 4 aspects of who we are as Indian people, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And there's where we have to keep that balance here amongst the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, meaning that to be respectful of tribal communities, tribal leadership, and how they do what they do, but also staying within our policy procedures from a legislative standpoint and an administrative standpoint. So I will, of course, always say to the commissioners, from an administrative side, this is what we can and cannot do, be very clear. And of course, they will do the same. And this is how we progress and move things forward for tribal people. Now you say state recognition, how's that done? Maryland Indian status process, going back a little bit, my previous words here, 1790, a tribal community is to, again, be able to show that they've had a constant community from 1790 to the present. And if that's not the case, then it's very difficult for that type of status to be provided to them through executive order. And that is a process that that we supervise, that we govern, that where there are changes, amendments that need to be done, this is where we depend on our commissioners to do so, taking those votes, send them up to recommendations to the governor or sitting governor, and making those decisions. The ultimate goal is that whatever tribe is indigenous, that they will petition for state recognition. We had an individual back in 2008, we were at a public meeting, and he stands up and he says, why doesn't the governor at that time, recognize all the tribal people? And the simple answer was because that's illegal. There's a process that each tribe has to go through. And so the governor just cannot just sign off on every tribe without their petitioning. And we've had 3 tribes to do so. When people talk about what has the commission done, what are the achievements? And I very quickly say 2 tribes in 2012 were granted state recognition, which allowed them the opportunity to apply for federal grants, federal funds, and a variety of other situations that will better the people and move them forward for future generations to come. And so we think about state recognition, that Maryland Indian status process, is that it gives them the opportunity, not to say that they are now Indian, that they are now, that they are now indigenous, or that they weren't beforehand. It's the opportunity to allow them to, again, apply for many of things amongst the federal government and their programs that will create a better way of life for them. And so I'm very proud of that. When you think about the first 2 tribes historically, that took 18 years, ladies and gentlemen, 18 years prior to the commission at that time to be awarded or granted state recognition. It was the Piscataway Conoy tribe and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We also had the opportunity, of course, within this administration, and speaking very highly and in a very respectful way of Governor Hogan, that he granted state recognition to the Akahine tribe, an Eastern Shore tribe, in 2018. And so the 2 biggest accomplishments there is the state recognition not only of the Piscataway and those 2 groups, but also, of course, of the Akahine. The ultimate goal that I have before I leave this position, and if I'm able to do so, is to have the other tribes petition for state recognition, and then hopefully that they be granted and awarded that same status. That status is very important. Let me explain to you from a legal standpoint. In order to be referred to as an American Indian Native American, and to utilize all the great things that come about with that, you have to have that type of recognition. Federal recognition or state recognition. The federal government recognizing you, your group, clan, or band, tribe as being American Indian, or state recognition, whether it be here in Maryland, North Carolina, Delaware, and providing you that opportunity. How is that important? I'll give you one example of why that's important. Say you have someone who's creating Native American art, and they are not Native American, they are not American Indian, they don't have an enrollment number, whether it's federal or state, which is important, which shows you that you are an enrolled member. They go out here and they sell their artistic work. And they sell for millions of dollars, hopefully, of course, if they were Native. But they're not. But they're making money off of Native peoples. And I consider that not to be the correct action that should occur. So what does status do? It allows people to be able to be recognized for who they are, which is American Indian, Native American, here in these United States. And that's why just one example is so important for a tribe to, again, achieve that recognition. And this is why the Maryland Commission of Indian Affairs was established, because Native Americans here in the state, like unfortunately the late Chief Billy Tyak, who just passed away in the month of September, who was the tribal leader of the Piscataway Indian Nation. He was one of the founders and the ones who got the backing to support that type of legislation that created the Maryland Commission on Affairs and allowed me to serve in this capacity. And so that is just one of those situations that occurred. The other thing that occurs is that Indian education. Indian education in the state of Maryland exists in Baltimore City, exists in Charles County, and hopefully it will start up in Baltimore County. If there are 10 Native American students in a school district, they have the opportunity to have Indian education, which is a federally funded program. They have to, of course, apply for it, but if you have 10 students there, why is that important? I can tell you from a personal, and I don't like to really use the word personal reflection. In fact, I was saying, I didn't want to use the word personal here because it's all about the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs. What I can tell you is that without Indian education, when I was way back in the day, much younger, and as a young person, I wouldn't be where I'm standing at now, because it instilled a type of leadership that was needed for this position in this job and everyone else. But it also led other individuals to be leaders in a variety of other ways. And that's what was sorely lacking from when we think about the 60s, and then in the 70s, there was such a resurgence of Indianness, of being proud to be Indian, and then leading over into the 80s, where that led to, again, so many other individuals making those choices. I'm going to involve myself in Indian affairs. And so this is where, again, how that without that program, many of us wouldn't be where we're at today. So I give a lot of respect to Indian education. But without state recognition, that is not possible for self-identifying tribes. So when I say self-identifying without state or federal recognition, that's really what you're termed as, self-identifying. So you can refer yourself as an Indian, you can refer yourself as an indigenous person, but in reference to all the opportunities that are afforded to our tribal people in such a manner, that is not possible. That's very unfortunate. Also comes down to the fact of, those who are, say, lumpy, who come to the state of Maryland, or who were born in the state of Maryland, they have their state recognition from another state, and making sure that the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs is involved so that when people are reading federal regulations, that they're not exempting someone because they're reading it word for word, but they're not understanding the context behind it. And that's why it's important for me to explain to you the state recognition process here, why it's so important to the tribal people, and how it will, again, increase their lifestyle and give them the opportunities that in any other time they wouldn't have. I can get a bit long-winded, I apologize, but if there are any questions you may have of some of the information I've provided thus far, or anything else, please.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So concerning words, you keep referring to Indians rather than Native American or American Indian or tribal community. Why do you have the single title of Indian in your commission's name?
So when the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs was established, the term Indian was something that was historically used throughout the country and also here in the state. The historical records, when they weren't either being destroyed purposely, by accident, or by nature, that was the term that was used. We use the term also American Indian because that is also the term that was used historically. You'll find that across the United States, the term Native American is many times used. So we do differentiate between the two. Many times people ask, what do you like to be referred to as? And I'll tell people many times, I would like for people to know me as my tribe and as my clan. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to that point yet. So they do understand and recognize the term American Indian, Native American, or more so, which is not many times being used today, as indigenous or indigenous peoples. So I'm recognizing the change in society, but also recognizing the historical account and the historical records that have been used.
But do you have the power to ease it into Native American or indigenous people or tribal communities?
If the commission so deemed it, they could always, encourage some type of conversation, motion, vote, and then forward that on to the governor in reference to a specific usage or terminology. That has already been done, and we have selected American Indian. And so that would also lead me to give you information in reference to American Indian Heritage Month, which is one of the commemorative months created in 2008. Because before that, the state of Maryland did it as a courtesy, and that's how I like to say it. Whereas now it's done by law. Not only that, then we lead ourselves to American Indian Heritage Day, which is normally the 4th Friday in November, or the day that follows that other holiday called Thanksgiving. Well, I call it Turkey Day. So. But American Indian Heritage Day is something that has taken place since 2008, and we, the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, continue to expound on that, get people to know what it is, just like what I'm doing right now, which is of course part of my job and the goal. And we would like to see more people recognize it, not only as individuals, but businesses, media, television, to expound on exactly what is taking place, what has been achieved by tribal people with the help of our legislators here in the state. And that, again, goes to that partnership that is so much needed with the commission. We can't do it alone, and we recognize that. That's just a fact. Love facts. Love facts. I'd rather use facts as a foundation than emotion any day. And so, therefore, by working with our legislators, by letting people know that you should, not that you have to, but you should recognize, what allowed Maryland to become what it is today, and that is definitely through tribal people, tribal eyes, tribal hands, physically, in many other aspects. We think about just the idea of governance. We think about the Haudenosaunee people and how their type of governance was mimicked by Benjamin Franklin and many other politicians at the time, and traveled upstate to what is now New York, and said, "Wow, you guys really got it down pat. You're working together. You got 5 different tribes. Tuscaroras, my people, came up in the late 1700s, but you got these tribes working together, and you've got your own type of constitution. You even got women choosing your leaders. Wow, that's interesting. They didn't like it at the time, but amazing how the rest of the world and the country finally caught up with Native peoples and said, wait a minute, there is something about women that is so unique. There is something about women that they have that we as men sort of lack at times. Wisdom, and when you combine wisdom and the idea of the strength and knowledge of men, the best choices can be made. So women were given the right to vote around 1924 when it was enacted, or some states didn't really enact it. But 1924 is also a year that that Native Americans were given the right to citizenship. Amazing how things parallel with each other. But of course we know that some states and some areas didn't enact those things exactly when they should have. And so we think about American Indian, Native American, the terms that were used, and we think about Indian. Well, I can tell you many of the documents that were penned and put in place were destructive to tribal people. That's just a fact. Now, I'm not going to dwell on that. No, I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm going to learn from it, but I'm not going to dwell on it. And what I like for people to recognize is that when things take place, thank God that there were situations put in place that would create better situations for tribal people. So I have to acknowledge the fact that there were things that were put in place that were against us, that were there to tear us down, and there were things that went on years later that were there to support us and help us. So when we think about language, as Peter said, is so important. But we know that here in the state of Maryland and other places, that we weren't allowed to speak our language. We weren't allowed to carry out our cultural situations. We weren't allowed to govern ourselves. And so again, taking away those things that made us who we are. Not even who we were, but who we are, because some of those traits still do exist. But how we're having to work. And that's the other part of the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs, is that we're here to not only promote those things, but to, again, work to bring those things back to the people and make them even stronger. And so we think about land acknowledgement. That's sort of a new thing that's being done. It's never been new for us because we always acknowledged our land. We always acknowledged, the people who were there. So this is why if Peter were to go somewhere, if I were to go somewhere, it's almost, it's really a courtesy and respect that we ask the people who are of that area, can we come and do what we're doing? And I remember in '94, Chief Billy Tyak actually made a comment in writing saying, who is this Lumbee coming up here and giving a lecture and a speech? And because against him being tribal leader that he was, he said, well, wait a minute. Did this guy come up and give me a call, or did he come by and talk to me? Did he shake my hand? Did he offer me tobacco? Did he say, hey, I'm coming up here and speaking about tribal people, is it okay? And that's how strong and how much he was ingrained into the way he was taught and the way things were done. And so I remember being a young person, me thinking I was all this and that, and saying, well, who's this guy to tell me where I can and cannot speak? But I wasn't looking back at the cultural aspect, of showing the respect that should have been shown to him. So, it's always a learning situation for me, and I apply that to the job because I realized, for instance, when I traveled to Europe, to London, and I noticed how things were done. And then when I traveled to Wales, I was like, oh, am I going to go through the same things I went through in London? Am I going to go through the same thing when I go to Wales the next year? And I realized that the people of Wales had been treated the same way we as Native Americans had been treated. Stripped of our land, stripped of our cultural identity. If we spoke our language, beaten and had to wear a wooden plaque. And it opened my eyes. And so I apply that to the job now by saying, wait a minute, don't go on assumptions. Let's go on the facts of the situation. And if those facts are working against the people, let's see what we can do to change that. And so this is why with the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs and the commissioners who are appointed, that we very much say, you're here nominated by the communities and by the tribal leadership. You're appointed by the governor. But we're here not as individuals, we're here as a group of people with one voice. And that is to move things, so we galvanize together to make sure whatever things that we decide in the month of February during our strategic planning session, that we put those things in motion. And that's why our theme this year is generational health for tribal communities. Every year we have a theme. It's not a month-long theme for American Indian Heritage Month, it's a year-long theme. And that theme has such a great meaning. We've gotten out of 2020, a year that we'll always unfortunately have in our heads and remembrance for a variety of reasons, many of them for us as tribal people, the losing and the loss of elders. We know that COVID struck our elderly, our elders, our senior citizens in the most destructive way in the very beginning. And we as Indian people lost that knowledge. We lost those individuals who were speaking our languages fluently. We lost those walking museums that were full of so much historical and knowledge and things that could be passed on to our future. And that was taken from us, unfortunately, for whatever reasons. And so what we realized as the American Commission on Affairs, we have got to start getting our young people involved with our elders and understanding that there's a respect level between the two. And this is why the Maryland Commission on Affairs has, worked on getting a younger generation on the commission versus the older generation that has been there for quite some time. It's about working together. It's not about just one group. It's about everyone coming together, galvanizing, speaking with one voice, and making things happen. So I'm sorry, I'm probably going over my time here, so I apologize.
No, I just have a couple of questions. You talked about not getting involved, but does the commission kind of do any arbitration in between, the tribes and things? Because is it or does it happen in the regular courts? So I'm just curious, does the commission come in that form at all?
So what the commission does is that we come in a very supportive manner, that when there is some type of let's say issue first. Let's use the word issue. If an issue comes up and it is brought to our attention by a community member or through a commissioner, therefore we look what we can do by working with other state agencies or any other entity to rectify that situation. Here's one of those best case examples. In 2008, we created the working group, appropriate place of repose for remains, tribal remains. So we have unidentified remains that have been sitting in a closet of our people. And there have been some analysis done and so forth, but they were sitting in a box. You know, and we say, you know, for us, it doesn't matter where they were dug up yesterday or 300 years ago or 500 years ago, whatever the case may be. They're still our people. And so we had to work with, you know, other state agencies like the Maryland Historical Trust and other individuals. We work with non-Native people, the archaeological side, to make sure that how is it through federal law and through state law that we can get these, our people back where they should be, which is back and turned into the ground. And so we were able to work with the tribal leadership. We were able to work with the other state agencies to make sure that the appropriate place of repose was not in a closet, but actually returned to the ground. Now that doesn't mean that they will return to the people, which is the ultimate goal, which did take place. Why? Because of state recognition, the remains of Piscataway people were returned to Piscataway, but it only could have been done through state recognition. But that's where, again, we have worked, and that's just one example of how we have worked to take a situation that was wrong and turn it into the correct way of doing things.
And the other question I had was about cultural appropriation. So is that something the commission, like, you know, helps people out, you know, stop cultural appropriation
So,
of like insignia and
yeah. You know, those are things that we do like to leave up to the nonprofit organizations, the tribal leadership, and I keep saying tribal leadership because it's so important that people understand that that's exactly what it is. They are the leadership of the community, whether it be one person like Chief Billy Tyak, who is now, of course, deceased. We now have Chief Mark Tyak, which is his son, or it's a tribal council, like the Piscataway Conoy Tribal Council, and other tribal leaders who represent the bands underneath that, like, for instance, the Cedarville Band. So what we do is we try to encourage them to, again, tackle on these things. You have to be proactive yourself. It can't be just left up to someone else. But again, taking a proactive stance in that. And where we can lend a supportive manner, whether it be our support letters or whether it's the commissioners themselves getting involved. I'll give you another example. COVID, 2020, and then going into 2021. What was our job? To work with the National Guard to inform them of the tribal communities that were seemingly seemed like they were being left out of the picture and not being seen in such a broad light like other ethnicities. And so what we had to do is make them aware of these tribal communities and say, look, here's where you need to be. Here are the individuals you need to speak with. And so acting as a source of information, again, to these larger entities and making the biggest impact. And that's really where we play a part. We love being somewhat of the middlemen in a lot of things that are going on and still taking place. Working with the Maryland State Archives to make it more accessible and easier for people to find out who were the tribal communities and the tribal people, long ago, historical times, and who are they now, which is really important. So people are always thinking about what took place in the past, but what about what's taking place right now for the future? So for me, once again, it's that balancing act. And I think a lot of times it's like someone always concentrating on the problem. Me, I know what the problems are. I'm more interested in the solutions. And that's, once again, why we have a great group of people who are appointed by the governor to serve as commissioners for MCIA.
And so what would you suggest for organizations, nonprofits, like art organizations like us, and then just, patrons, what can we do to support the mission?
If you don't know who the tribal leadership and those POCs, those points of contacts are, contact us first. And then let us allow you to speak directly to them. See, one of the biggest misconceptions is that the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs oversees the tribes of the state. Not at all. We're there to act as a resource to them and have a way that resource might come about. Whether it's me there being physically, or me there with a support letter, or the legislation or executive orders that come into play through the governor and on down. So I encourage any organization, any entity, any individual, please reach out to the people themselves. Let them talk and tell you who they are, what they're going through, where their needs may be. Some of our tribes are somewhat still closed in such a way where if I send out a needs assessment, which did happen, I sent out a needs assessment. I said, wow, this might be a great idea. What are needs assessments? How are they utilized? They're utilized for funding opportunities, especially for federal funding. Well, some of them felt it was invasive. Like, why are you asking this and that? So again, attempting to do what I can, but still saying to myself, I've got to respect the wishes of the community. So again, we're only here, I serve many times as an advisor, many times as a consultant to what can be done, but the ultimate situation is left up to the people, as it should be.
So if I can address some of those. So issues of cultural appropriation are not under the commission, that would be more the American Indian movement, which you could look at as sort of like the NAACP for American Indian people. But they are the ones who pretty much enforce stuff like that. The same thing, it would be inappropriate for a state agency to get involved in a tribal affair. You know, because whatever the decision is going to be, at least a third of the people are not going to be happy with it. And so the state is then seen as imposing its will. So the state allows the tribes to solve the problems on their own. And in terms of not as individuals, you know, helping us out really, in terms of Keith's job is he's, along with the commission, an advisor to the governor. So when an activist like me causes trouble, that keeps Keith employed, you know what I mean? Because the governor's got to turn to him for advice. What do I do about the football team? What do I do about the Columbus statues? This is his point man. So when we bring these issues up, this is when the governor sees his importance and his role. So that's the key, I think, is being active, promoting Indian affairs, Indian, you know what I mean, perspectives and stuff like that in your communities as individuals.
And you had previously served on the commission?
No, I currently serve, but
Okay.
I'm not here as a commissioner,
Okay.
I'm just here as a citizen. But yes, I was nominated by my tribe, and just what an honor. And that's how I got to work so closely with Keith, because, you know, he would normally lead the powwows, and as you saw, he would instruct you in enormous detail about the facts. And so when I got to work with him intimately, and it was, but before then, we were kind of, because I was the protester, I was, you know.
How are the Indian communities in Maryland organized? I mean, I get this feeling that they could live all over Baltimore, and are there meetings then that they might go to? I mean, what is, some states like New York have definite reservations or nations.
Yeah.
Arizona has nations. I haven't heard of any nations in Maryland.
You've got some proud history in that. I mean, Maryland, if I might be corrected, but I'm pretty sure Rico has said that Maryland is the first state to have a reservation. As this also is the first North American indigenous community to convert to Catholicism or to Christianity, period, is considered to have taken place in Maryland. And you know, it's interesting in terms of perspective. You know, we all talk about Thanksgiving, but it was really Virginia. It was really Jamestown. It was along here that the first contact really took place. So there's a lot of history there. How the tribes are organized, it's individuals. I mean, the problem is, you know, you've got, you know, hundreds of years of leaders trying to figure out where the people could be safe. And as Keith pointed out, his tribe, the Tuscarora, went from like the North Carolina region all the way up to upstate New York to seek refuge, and they were accepted. Other tribes did, and they were not accepted among the Haudenosaunee. So, you know, it's varies. You've got some communities on the eastern shore which are still, you know, pretty much intact, but are reclusive. And then you've got people like me who are so urbanized, you know what I mean? So it just varies.
And the urbanized, has there been, you know, we are allotted to Ancestry.com right now. I can imagine that if you did not know that you had any Indian, Native American background, is there any attempts to find out what happened to a lot of the people?
Well, I'll just look at it this way. I think the last count is around 6,000 unmarked graves that have been found at Indian boarding schools throughout Canada and the United States. I mean, that's at least 6,000 unknown stories. So it's really, really difficult to find out what happened. And I mean, I'll tell you personally in my case, my family. You know, my family, people can pass, and they do in my family. I have white people, I have black people, I have Arabs, I have Jew. People just walk up and say, I'm Jewish, I'm Hispanic. You know, when I said that I was going to identify as Native American just because that's what felt comfortable for me, my family was livid. They were like, my grandfather said, we got rid of that a long time ago. Why do you want to go back there? You know, my aunt said, you know, don't identify with those proctors. It's not going to get you. Look at them. They're all starving. You know, where are you going to go with this? How are you going to put kids through college, you know, if you identify with this? And I don't know what to say. I mean, I tried different ways and stuff, but this was just what was home for me. And, you know, it's a difficult thing, but I like to use the Gyun Yuk as like a land acknowledgement. Because for those 15 minutes, we returned the land back to its original, like, operating procedure, you know what I mean? That we are grateful, that we are very specific about what we're grateful for, and that we're comprehensive. We try to think of everything. We take nothing for granted. I mean, just the idea that you're looking at animals as being close to you at home and then deep in the forest as well. That's really unique perspective.
So, to her question, is there any, what is the benefit of being designated as a reservation or nation versus, like in the situation of Maryland, where it's not as clearly defined, like if you drive in Arizona or New Mexico, you actually see the things, and is there any...
Casinos.
Okay.
I couldn't help that one, but no, but there's,
I was trying not to say that.
no, but it gives you, I mean, it's very powerful. It gives you a sense of identity. It gives you a history. It gives you, you know, a culture, a framework, a platform that you can build off of. Because, you know, so many people, you know, wonder who they are. And when they find the answers, they don't like them necessarily. Well, if you don't like the fact that Maryland is the way it is or whatever, you want to go back to that, having a recognized tribe gives you the capacity to negotiate with an organized entity. You know, but then, you know, when you become federally recognized, then you're under the auspices of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a huge bureaucracy, you know what I mean? So it's, I guess it has its positives and its negatives. I mean, there are a lot of national conventions and stuff like that. And I mean, I want to point out too that, you know, and I think I gotta give Keith credit for this too. Prince George's County is considered like the 4th fastest growing Native American county in the United States. Yeah, according to the latest census. So there are about 24,000 people in Prince George's County who identify as Native American. It's not a big county, but it's growing quickly. And I don't know whether that's people just checking the box on the census or whatever, but it's significant, especially for this area. I also would argue that in this DMV region, we have more educated and wealthy Native Americans in terms of density than just about anywhere. You've got all the Native Americans in NIH, in the Defense Department, in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, in the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. I mean, and Congress of American Indians is in Washington. So there's enormous talent and resources right here in our own backyard that we wouldn't think of. And so when in economic development, I mean, one of the reasons why they put me forward, I think, was because I had a vision, you know, given the fact that we've got BWI here, and we've got the Museum of the Native Americans in Washington, you know, this is an ideal place for people from Europe and Asia to come in, you know, because the transportation out west is really difficult. You go to Montana or North Dakota, but they can have an experience here, and none of that would have really ever come about had it not been for the TIAC, keeping the traditions alive through the 20s. That's why when he said that Billy died a month ago, it's really, really a significant historical event in Maryland history, because, you know, these guys are like Cesar Chavez or Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, they kept the traditions alive when it wasn't possible or feasible or didn't make sense to do so, you know. So, and I mean, gosh, here's the thing, our traditions are still alive, you know, despite disease, like, you know, COVID, compare that to getting blankets that have smallpox in them. Our traditions are still alive despite the internet and cell phones. You know, they're still viewed as having authenticity and weight. And so it's really, really powerful thing. And so when you get that recognition of that, it gives you access to what all that means.
Thank you.
Question and point for you all to expand on. The question is, how can we as non-natives be allies and amplify as you lead? And by the way, I'm Sue Marcus, Quaker Indian Affairs Committee. And so that's my question to both of you. The point that kind of riffing off what the friend here said was, I think also she was interested in Indian identity through ancestry and that sort of thing, and that may be something you choose to expand on or not.
Facebook.
Facebook?
So as far as the state is concerned, is to first identify what type of structure they have for the community. So going back to your question, the Piscataway Indian Nation utilized the hereditary chiefdom in their situations. With the Piscataway Canoa tribe, second group or group that has state recognition, they utilize a tribal council. And so there is a uniqueness between the two. If you think about the Pocomoke Indian Nation, they have a paramount chief, which is Paramount Chief Norris Howard. And so from one community to the next, it's just really important to reach out and just to ask that question, what is the structure of your community and who should I be speaking with? So going more sort of to your question, the identity and the idea of what is important about whether it's a nation or whether they're categorized as a tribe, those types of terms are more European terms that have been utilized throughout history, whereas the people are the people. An example of that, or factual example, is that when you refer to the name of a tribe, it means something about the people. And so whether you refer to them as a nation, whether you refer to them as a tribe, whether you refer to them as a particular band, they still have their structure within themselves. And it's always important just to ask that question, how is it that? And then with your question about how can we help, how we get involved, many times I would again tell you to reach out to their leadership, and then or reach out to their tribal organization. Many of the tribes here in Maryland, they utilize the 501c or organizational situation to show the people that they were an organized group. And this is something that, of course, is important to mainstream society to be able to see that. And this is why you have the PCCS, or you had the Maryland Indian Tourism Association that helps support the Choptico Band of Piscataway. So you have those organizations that are set up that will help, either funnel or organize the tribe and what they're looking to achieve. And this is where the Maryland Commission on Affairs comes into play to help recognize that. So we recognize, again, those tribal leaderships through the documentation and through the individuals themselves, putting them in front of us and saying who they are. But not only just saying who they are, but also backing up with the support of documentation and the people themselves. Anyone can come up and say that they're a chief, but where's the proof behind that? And that's what the Maryland Commission on Affairs does. We quantify, and we also look at it from a documented point of view.
Yes. How do you maintain a spiritual, cultural balance in your life and work, especially in handling challenges and achieving social justice and healing multi-generational trauma?
Wow, can that be our next event? That's a great question.
Some of it was your answer question.
Oh, okay.
Should I repeat?
The answers are not in context.
Okay.
Somebody repeat what she asked.
Wait.
You want to?
Stand up? Yeah.
Okay. How do you maintain a spiritual, cultural balance in your life and work, especially in handling challenges and achieving social justice and healing multi-generational trauma?
So for me, I'm going to take it because I'm thinking you'll probably have a longer. For me, it's following the policy and procedures of the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs under its legislative and bylaws. So it's very easy for me to answer that question because I'm not looking at from a personal point of view. I'm looking at from what does my job entail? How can I utilize my position and what am I expected to do to further tribal communities? And so that's what I utilize. If I were standing up here, not a representative of the Maryland Commission on Affairs, my answer probably would be similar to either Peters or Lengthy, or again, coming from myself. Here, my goal is to represent the MCIA, not myself.
Could you speak personally or give resources?
Could I speak personally? I can. For me as an individual, I see things not as a conflict. I see things where there can be balance or there can be improvement. I do not allow society to choose and say what my spirituality should and should not be. And for me, that's where the culture has to be respected, even from an administrative point of view. I have to respect what the culture is of that particular community. And so, for instance, if it's the clan mothers and it's a matriarch, I understand that that's the respect that's there. Not that society says that women are important. It's the fact that the culture says that women are important and for these reasons. And so, therefore, once again, it's a factual situation. I'm not even looking at it from what I feel. I'm looking at it from what it is. And I find that that's really what is helpful in my position when someone doesn't understand tribal communities and doesn't understand tribal traditions or teachings or governance, that I can relay that information to them. So people can look at it from a cultural standpoint. I can flip the coin and say, no, this is the facts of their culture, and that's what we're presenting. But if I allow society to tell me what is correct or incorrect, if I allow society that is not native to tell me what I should and should not be, I mean, that's a rubber band effect. It's like one day where it's okay to eat the white of the egg, 20 years later it's wrong to eat the white of the egg. I mean, make up your mind. Whereas we have made up our minds. We know who we are. We know what makes us who we are. It's making sure that the rest of society can comprehend that as well.
Right. And deal with it. Because, one of the things about our way of life is the fact that unlike Hinduism or Judaism or Christianity, it doesn't fit really well into a capitalist thing. Like a ceremony that you might undergo to answer such a question would be a vision quest. That's a couple of days in the forest, by yourself, no food or water, being supervised. So it takes like a week and all the preparation beforehand to do this one ceremony. And that is not compatible with capitalist, where just do it on the weekends and you're done and it's an hour and, So it's very, very difficult. But it's a personal quest, and a lot of it comes through investigation of your heritage. Because when you are encountering a difficult situation, you're usually going to turn back to your history to navigate through. What did we do before? And so it's a matter of researching the facts, as he said, to figure out what that is, and then contextualizing it for yourself as an individual. Because you can't do everything. We grew up in air-conditioned buildings and with cars and blankets and stuff. And I'm going to ask you to spend the night in the woods with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be really, really hard. Whereas for a traditional pre-colonial youth, you could do it all the time. You know what I mean? Oh, you only want 4 nights? You know what I mean? So it is very hard. It's an individual quest, and it's one that, and in our case, your case, it may combine several things: Hinduism, Catholicism, traditional indigenous religions. You've got to find your way, because a lot of the terms and stuff are fluid now with the meshing of cultures and ways of being. And like I said, you make that decision.
Thank you.
Can you tell me how many tribal councils there are in Maryland and how many chiefs there are in Maryland?
Wow.
There are 4 chiefs. There are 3 tribal councils. There are 3 state, or should I say 3 organizations that are located, 2 in Baltimore County, or should I say the Baltimore metropolitan area, and then 1 in Southern Maryland. There are 2 museums, one in the Southern Maryland area, which is Waldorf, and the other being in the Baltimore City area.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So just a bit more information, but yeah.
Can you name the tribe?
Sure. You have the Piscataway Indian Nation, which is now Chief Mark Tyak, who is the head of that in a hereditary manner. You have the Piscataway Conoy Tribe, which is run by the Piscataway Tribal Council. But yet underneath what we refer to as the Piscataway Conoy Tribe, you have the Cedarville Band of Piscataway, which is the leader or tribal chair, would be Natalie Proctor. You also have the Chaptico Band, which has also their Elders Council is associated with them. And unfortunately, I do not know the names of those individuals, but I can tell you that they are very quick to let me know what they like and what they don't like. You also have, as I mentioned earlier, the Paramount Chief, Paramount Norris Howard of the Pocomoke Indian Nation. You have Clarence Tyler, who is the chief of the Accohonic tribe, which also has a tribal council that he answers to. And we have the Yohigini Band of Shawnee, who unfortunately have somewhat disbanded in the western part of the state. So we haven't had a great communication with them, and not only myself, but other state agencies as well. You also have the Baltimore American Indian Center, which is run by a board which is elected by the community.
And you notice he said Shawnee, and it's important because that was the tribe of Tecumseh. And if you don't know him, Tecumseh was one of the early native leaders who tried to unify all of the different nations to maintain sovereignty. Well, today is actually the day that Tecumseh passed, so it's pretty significant. And there were Shawnee, so Tecumseh was probably in Maryland at some point during his life recruiting. Although, you know, for the Piscataway, one of the things you have to know is that, you know, the center of the nation is Anacostia. And so Anacostia translated means good trading place. So it's probable that this tribe was very, very peaceful, that this was almost like a Switzerland, if you will, you know, among the different nations. There are different pockets like that throughout the eastern seaboard, which are just neutral hunting areas and not really clearly defined. Oh, sure. Do you mind if I tell a story real quick? Cool. All right, to conclude, you guys, I'll give you this to walk away from. So, one of the things I like to do is tell stories. This is an indigenous story that I hope you like. It's one of my favorites, and it's a short one, so you got to pay attention. Sorry, I missed. I should probably go back here. Huh? Back on stage, or is it okay here? It's okay. It's okay. All right. So, the name of the story is Coyote and the Other One. So Coyote was in the woods and jumped out into a clearing, and it happened to be this farmer's land. And the farmer saw the coyote on his property, and he says, "There's that coyote! Get my gun!" And so the coyote's sitting there kind of smiling at the farmer when all of a sudden, from behind him, another coyote comes out and jumps right next to him. And the first coyote was shocked. He says, "All this time I've lived here, and I've never seen another coyote." He says, "Look at you. You have a nose like mine. You have eyes like mine. You have a tail like mine. We have the same color." And the farmer screamed, "Look, there's another one. Hurry, hurry, get my gun." So the first coyote turns to the second coyote and says, "Let's get out of here." So the two of them jump back into the woods, away from the sight of the farmer. And the first coyote says to the second coyote, "I'm just shocked. Where did you come from? Another coyote." And the second coyote said to the first coyote, says, "I may have a nose like you, and eyes like you. I may have a tail like you and color like you, but I am not a coyote." The first coyote said, "You gotta be kidding me. I'm a coyote, and you look just like me. You've gotta be a coyote." He says, "I tell you what," the first one says, "I'll prove to you you're a coyote. Let's go back in front of the farm." So sure enough, the first coyote jumps out, and the farmer screams, "There's that coyote again! Get my gun!" The second coyote jumps out, and he says, "There's the other one! Hurry, hurry!" The two coyotes jump back. And the second coyote says to the first coyote, "You see, I'm an other one." But that's a profound statement. So, when you encounter moments of extreme racial prejudice or something, that story you can reflect on, and it's an approach to solving the problem. I'm not going to let these people tell me who I am. I'm going to be myself. And this is who I am. This is how I feel.
So thank you so much, Peter. This is definitely of us can be activated to amplify the voices, continue the stories, and then bring it to the present and help in the future, because as much as we inform ourselves of history, it's only to inform ourselves to do better in the future. And so I believe in that very strongly. And thank you all for joining us here today, and looking forward to more such conversations and journeys. And enjoy, for the people who are going to watch the play now, I think this has set you right up for the play.
Thank you.